Okay, good afternoon, Council, and anyone that's watching virtually. Welcome to staff to our council meeting of Tuesday, February 22nd. The time is 1:01 p.m. Hopefully our live stream today will be working. We had some technical difficulties the last time, so we're still probably waiting to get that up and going. So if anybody's interested, they can watch it then. So at this time, I'll call the meeting to order. And I will also at this time read the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the township of Asphodel-Norwood is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Islands First Nations. We respectively acknowledge that the Williams Treaties First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. Thank you. So at this time, I'll ask council for a moment of silent reflection so we may reflect upon our duties of today as councillors. Please, thank you. Thank you. I'll ask council at this time if anyone has any declaration of pecuniary interest at this time or at time of the report that comes in. Seeing no hands, thank you very much. I'm looking then for a motion that the recommendation of the motion that the Township of Asphodel-Norwood Council meeting for today, February 22nd, be approved as circulated. Motioned by Councillor War, seconded by Councillor Archer. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I'm also looking for a motion to recommend it that the council meeting minutes of January 25th that we held be adopted as presented. Deputy Mayor Burt's made that motion, seconded by Councillor Walsh. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Was there any business arising from those minutes, council? All right, seeing no hands, and thank you. On to the consent agenda then. It's very large. Correspondence for information. So we have C1 through to C8, and then the reports R1. The recommendation that the Township of Asphodel-Norwood approves the consent agenda as circulated. Motion by Councillor War, seconded by Councillor Archer. Is there any discussion on any of the items in our consent agenda? All right, seeing no hands, thank you. All in favor? That's carried, thank you. We have delegation. Are our guests here today yet, Candace? You're muted there.
No, they are not here as of yet. I know Kyle is trying to touch base with them right now just to see if they're having a little bit of a hold up. So if council is okay, I would move on to R2. Ed can speak to that, and then we can.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion to move on. We'll just come back and defer back to the delegation when they're able then. So
if council's okay with that, yes.
Sure. So our R2 then would be Ed Whitmore, our Chief Building Official Planning Coordinator, and this is reports regarding a withdrawal of site plan control application 2431 Dummer Asphodel Road. So Candace, you said you were going to take that, or Ed? One? Whoever wants to, go ahead.
I can speak to it if you wish.
That'd be fine, Ed. Yes, please.
Okay. I just wanted to bring this forward to council for information because it was a sort of a lengthy process when we started out with cannabis and implementing it into our zoning bylaw and implementing it into our site plan control bylaw. And then we had an application and it was up on the Dummer Asphodel Road. It was a very long process. It was like a year or more. We wanted to get hydrogeological study done for water consumption. And there was just a lot of information that was unknown and we went through all the different steps, and we got the application completed and all the drawings and all the paperwork done. We collected the fees and went through the process and brought it to council, and it was approved by council. And then it went back to the proponent solicitor. And then just recently, it was brought to our attention, they requested that they not enter into the agreement, that in fact they were ceasing to cultivate cannabis for medical reasons or medical requirements, and just asked if they could cancel or withdraw the application. And so I just wanted to bring that forward to let everybody know. And our bylaws official went out and did the inspection and confirmed that there was no cannabis being grown inside the buildings. And now they'll just take care of the building permits for the greenhouses that were put on site. And then the property should be in compliance with all the regulations out there. And moving forward, I think that it was a really good learning experience for us, and that we should be able to proceed a lot quicker. And having COVID to stick handle around, we probably would have taken legal action, and this would have went before the courts, but there were no courts available to us for doing the bylaw issues during the COVID. Everything was backed up. So we just was patient, and we ended up getting through the site plan control process, even though it took a lot longer than what we wanted it to take. And at the end of it, they're withdrawing the application, and I just wanted council to be aware of that. That's all.
All right, thanks, Ed. Before I ask for a motion, I'll ask council if they have any questions on this report. All right, seeing no hands then. The recommendation for the motion is that we accept this report for this withdrawal of their application for information. Motion by Councillor Archer, seconded by Councillor Walsh. Is there any other discussion? Last chance. No hands, all in favor. And that's carried, thank you. So I see on the computer that our guests are here for delegations and presentations, I believe. Candice, with a nod of your head, yes? Okay, so this delegation and presentation is from J.L. Richards Engineers, Architects and Planners regarding Township of Asphodel-Norwood potable water storage, Schedule B Municipal Class Environmental Assessment. Candice, I'll allow you to do the introductions if you wouldn't mind, please.
Thank you. So I can't see anyone there. So I'm assuming it's Matthew that's here. Oh, there we go. Hey, Matthew. So with us today is Matthew Morcom from JL Richards. They are the consulting engineering firm that assisted township staff through the environmental assessment process to determine the location and best approach for the new water storage solution, aka a new water tower, to address all of the concerns as identified in the EA. Matthew does have a presentation that he's going to present to council, and of course council can ask any questions either throughout the presentation or at the end. Matthew, I've given all panelists the ability to share your screen, so you should be able to share and be in control of your presentation as you work through it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, before you start, Matthew, then when you go to share your screen, I'll lose part of my council just with the visual. So if any council has any questions at the time, just speak up and give your name, and then carry on with your question if that's the case. Okay, council, please. Go ahead, Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can everybody see my screen? I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Everybody see that? Okay, perfect. So thank you very much. As Candace said, we were retained to complete the Schedule B Municipal Class Environmental Assessment for the water storage in the town or in the village. So we put together a bit of a presentation here. This is kind of the agenda we'll be going through, just kind of looking at the overview of the water system, and then kind of going through the through a municipal class environmental assessment, the phase 1 and phase 2, looking at some source water protection, mitigative measures and consultation process that was completed, as well as the project schedule and next steps. So kind of walking through this. So in a bit of an introduction of sort of how this project came to be, and I'm sure most council is aware, in 2018, the standpipe inspection report was completed, identifying the standpipe as good to fair, with an action plan for some rehabilitation in the near future. In July of 2020, an infrastructure assessment report was done by Engage that looked at all of the infrastructure, specifically as well the standpipe, and that it was identified that the existing standpipe did not have adequate storage for the current population. In addition to that, there was some concerns with water pressure issues, mainly kind of in the northwest corner of the village. So in December of 2020, the township initiated the Schedule BEA for the water storage alternatives to look at that. Moving forward. So this is just an overview of what the municipal class environmental assessment process is. So under this, we do phase one, which is sort of identifying the problems and opportunity within the confines of what we're looking at. Phase two is looking at the different alternative solutions that we can develop, and then coming up with a recommended solution. We also present that to the public through a public information center. And then once that's completed, we move into the notice of completion and have any final comments come in from the public. So that being said, in the phase one report, we kind of developed some hydraulic modeling and some tools to help us analyze the water system within the village, develop the alternative solutions, develop some preliminary costing, and brought that to the public for their input and consultation. So that's kind of an overview of sort of how we develop and what the municipal class environmental assessment process is. So just kind of walking through the village of Norwood's water system. So the existing system has 4 ground wells, a chlorine disinfection treatment plant, as well as the standpipe, and obviously the water mains and hydrants and valves and things like that within the distribution system. The existing system services about 2,100 people. And the existing standpipe is approximately 7.6 meters in diameter and about 27 meters high, and was constructed in 1993. So the as the Engage report had indicated, and we had confirmed as well, whenever you're doing a analysis on a water storage facility, there is an analysis that the Ministry of Environment guidelines dictate on how this is calculated. We call it the ABC calculation, which is the a usable volume within that standpipe to maintain a certain pressure. And within that usable space, as you can see here on the diagram, the usable space, there's 3 sort of categories. One is fire storage, the second is equalization storage, and the third is emergency storage. So each one of those have a specific calculation of how you generate those based on fire flows and other aspects. Going through that calculation, we developed, and it's currently indicated that the total usable storage recommended right now is about 1,050. And within the existing standpipe is about 855, leaving a deficiency of about 166 cubic meters. So as I had mentioned, the other aspect of this under the phase one is looking at the distribution system. With a water treatment system, they all work together, both water treatment, water storage, and the distribution system within the town. So we've developed a preliminary model just to help us analyze the different aspects of the distribution system and see how the different alternatives would affect the system as a whole. These are always sort of, they have their percent of error, and each time you do a model iteration, they get better and better. This is the first iteration, so obviously the, these are all relative to each other, I guess. So looking at the distribution system, we typically look at 2 aspects. One is the peak hour flow. So during the peak time of the day, typically 9 o'clock-ish, we kind of look at how are the flows, and everybody's kind of using their showers and things like that. How are we getting, how is the distribution and how is the pressure through the system? So that's the one on the left here. As you can see here, there are a variety of nodes that distribute at different pressures throughout it. We have flagged that you typically like to operate somewhere between 50 and 80 PSI. So we had just flagged the percentage of nodes that were below the 50 PSI or slightly below. And then also on the right-hand side, we also look at sort of the fire flows and what can come out of a hydrant. And typically we like to see above 30%. I will say too that with the distribution system, just so everybody's aware, it's always a balancing act between providing potable water for residents and providing fire protection. They're sometimes at a bit of a contradiction, because if you sized it for one or the other, neither would be provided. So I always say these are guidelines and targets that we try and hit. Most municipalities always have, especially at the extremities of the village or town or city, always have some lower pressure issues or lower fire flows. It's just inevitable, because you're trying to balance providing potable water for people while maintaining quality of water for them to drink, while providing sort of the higher flows that you need to fight a fire. So it's a balancing act, and we're always looking to improve systems. I just like to make sure kind of we're all on the same page when it comes to that, is that we're looking for improvements and how we can make the system better. So summary of the existing conditions, kind of as I'd summarized, there is currently an insufficient water storage amount within the current standpipe. The condition of the standpipe was fair to good, and there was an action plan needed for interior rehabilitation in the near future identified within that report. As we had said, there's some nodes that are outside of the preferred range. We've identified 2 junctions here. As I had indicated, these are relative to each other. The model's always being improved. It's used as a tool to look at how this will improve the system. So both on the pressure constraints and improving pressures within the system, as well as fire flows and fire constraints. So once we kind of walk through the end of phase 1, we develop what's called a problem opportunity statement. So within this, we look at both what is the current problem, and by fixing or looking at this problem, what are the opportunities that we can then integrate into this solution. So through discussions with the municipality, we developed this problem opportunity statement. So the problem being the existing water system in the village of Norwood is facing a number of constraints, including insufficient treated water storage, deteriorated standpipe conditions, low pressure concerns, and fire flow issues in certain areas of the distribution system. The opportunity of looking at this problem is to address the current water storage in the potable water system, both now and in the future, because we always want to make sure that we can not just build for today, but also look at how is this going to affect things in the future. So moving into phase 2 of this process, this is where we identify the alternative solutions. So going through this in discussions, we kind of group these categories into 3 main aspects. One is the approach, the second is location, and the third is the type of storage or the configuration. So under each one of those, we kind of grouped them together into these 3 categories. So under the approach, we have the do nothing, which is a municipal class requirement to look at if we just continued as status quo. It's sort of setting a baseline of what we need to do. And then the other approach is to obviously build new storage. Moving down into the locations, we looked at 4 different locations that I'll get to here in a second, as well as 4 different types of configurations. So maybe what I'll do is I'll keep scrolling down here and I'll kind of walk through each of these different aspects. So the first thing we looked at when we went through these 3 categories is we do a screening process to look at the viability of each one and whether they kind of meet the mustard or don't have any huge showstoppers or obvious things that don't really need us to dig down into the details. So under this, we looked at the approach. So one is the do nothing. Like I said, it's a Class EA process that we use as a benchmark. So we just kind of develop these pros and cons or advantages and disadvantages to determine whether we carry this forward. So the do nothing, obviously, we are going to carry forward, and then construct a new water storage. It does address the problem and opportunities that we've developed, but unfortunately, it does have a capital cost to it. So both of these were carried forward from the screening process. So moving into the location, which was the next category we grouped these into. So through the infrastructure assessment report that was done in 2020, there were a couple of locations identified, and in further discussions with the municipality, we developed 4 main options for the locations. One being sort of right at the water treatment plant, right next to the existing standpipe. The second was near the entrance to the landfill, right at the entrance. The third was up on the escarpment at the Public Works building. And the fourth, which was originally talked about, was down at the corner of 10th Line and County Road 42, down in that area. So looking through the screening process, option 1 for the water treatment plant, the advantages are that there's mostly infrastructure there that's already in place for the standpipe. So putting one in close proximity to that is beneficial. It generally didn't have any major showstoppers or any issues. It was already zoned for what it's being used for, and we didn't see any major showstoppers within this category. So this one was carried forward. The entrance at the landfill site. It is an ideal location from a configuration and location perspective. However, in sort of some preliminary review of it and discussions with different agencies and things like that, the tower would be very in close proximity to the large hydro lines that are there that run just adjacent to that, as well as the area that we would have in that area is within the floodplain. So there would be additional costs and additional mitigative measures in order to place the tower in that location, which is really going to drive the costs for this infrastructure up. So based on these sort of like bigger picture items in terms of consultation with outside agencies and sort of the anticipated higher cost, this one was actually screened out as an initial concept. The third one was the Public Works building, at the Public Works building on top of the esker there. So we take a look at that one. It is at a higher elevation than the ground around, which is always a benefit when you're doing elevated storage or trying to build pressure through height. So that's a definite benefit. And we didn't see any major showstoppers from that perspective. There wasn't any consultation with any of the outside agencies that had any major concerns with that. So this one was carried forward. The fourth option, like I said, was the one at County Road 42 and 10th Line. While it is at a higher elevation, the town does not own the land in that area, and there's no water mains or infrastructure within that area that could be integrated into this to get water to and from it. So based on that one was also screened out as a possible solution. And then moving into the screening of the configuration type. So typically there's a variety of different ones we can do. We've identified the 4 major ones that typically are done. So the first one is the below grade reservoir and a pumping station or a booster station, which is buried concrete tanks in the ground with pumps that you can then pump the water that's stored in there out into the distribution system. So looking at that one, we looked at both the advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, it's buried in the ground. Nobody really sees it. So it doesn't have a lot of impacts from that perspective. It gives you some operational flexibility because you divide off the different cells within it, so you can do maintenance. The problem or the disadvantage with this is it's not typically done for larger systems because the tanks have to be so very large when you're talking about storing 1,000 cubic meters. The energy consumption, because now you're not using gravity to provide that water back into the system when you need it. So there's higher energy cost to pump it again once you put it in the tank. The capital cost is typically higher, and the operational and maintenance costs as you're pumping and using energy, which has movable parts that always takes more maintenance. Based on that and just sort of the advantages and disadvantages, this one was screened out. The at-grade reservoirs is similar to configuration number 1, except as you can see in the picture here, it's sort of an elevated, sort of a bigger tank that just sits on the ground rather than buried in the ground. So it has very similar advantages and disadvantages to the configuration 1. Slightly less capital cost. The footprint can be a little bit better. But again, it was also screened out for the similar reasons that the first one was. The third configuration was the composite elevated tank. Excuse me. So this has the least complicated operational because you pump the water from the treatment plant up into there, and then it drains by gravity as you need it back into the system. It's consistent kind of generally with the current configuration with the using the standpipe. The disadvantage is it's a very large tank, so the tank is elevated, as you can see here. That's the top piece of the tank, and then the piece in the middle is just a concrete structure that holds that tank in the air. So it does sit quite high, and so it's quite visible. It can produce shade in certain areas. So we consider that a disadvantage from a public perspective. When you have to do maintenance on this, it does become more of an issue because it's not segregated like the other ones were, where you have certain areas that you can still maintain your storage. You have to take this offline and do it. And this is the most expensive of all the options by far, and has the highest capital cost. So based on that, this one was also screened out, leaving configuration 4, which is the standpipe, which you guys currently have. Obviously has the smallest footprint. Again, least complicated operation. Very similar to the standpipe in terms of energy, where you're not pumping it out of the tanks back into the system again once you need it. It does have a high visibility like the storage tank does, but the maintenance is still similar in the sense that you have to take it offline and able to do it. But the capital cost is a bit more reasonable and a bit more in line with what we were hoping to meet on this one. So that being said, kind of summarizing these screenings, under the approach, we had 2 configurations, obviously the do nothing, which is sort of our baseline, the construct a new storage tank. The location we carried 2 forward, and under configuration, we carried just the standpipe forward. So moving through that, obviously it's just the do nothing approach. Under option 2, it's sort of an amalgamation of these different ones. So it's constructing a new standpipe at the existing water treatment plant. So it's approach 2 in location 1 using configuration 4. And the third amalgamation of the options was constructing a new standpipe at the public works yard. So then again, approach 2 at location 2 using configuration 4, if you kind of follow our sort of categories here. So servicing option number 1, which was the do nothing alternative, is equivalent to the status quo and typically cared for it as a baseline, as I had said. The capital assessment management plan noted that every 10 years, interior and interior would require inspection, and that the inspection report also indicated that the cathode protection system would need to be installed immediately for the standpipe to remain in service. So looking at this, the servicing solution does not address any of the storage deficiencies, any of the pressure or fire flow improvements that we're trying to make. And that for that reason, we didn't kind of look at it further. It's like I said, it's just the status quo to use that as a baseline. So moving into servicing solution number 2, which is to place the standpipe at the existing water treatment plant. So the existing site obviously is already developed for a standpipe. It already has one right there. It would have minimum impacts to the natural environment, being so close and already in a sort of developed area. There would be some additional redundant water main work that would be needed, as well as some active mixing within the standpipe. The third option, or we're calling 3A here, which is at the public works yard. So this is a new storage tank up on the esker in behind the public works garage. So that being said, to the standpipe and back from the standpipe whenever we need the water. Just to note that The reason we call this option 3A was we also looked at an option of, rather than looking at water main coming up Highway 7, we looked at feeding off of County Road 40 through the landfill site and around and tying into the standpipe that would have been here and tying in that way. We did look at that option, but it was more expensive than this option to get in and through there. So that was something that we kind of had ruled out. So having sort of developed the different options and laid out what the sort of impacts of the two solutions were, we, through the municipal class and environmental assessment process, you typically look at 4 categories: the financial, the natural, technical, and social cultural. Each one of these we look at in terms of how they affect the different aspects in isolation. So when we look at impacts, and the way we typically do this is through a qualitative evaluation system, looking at both a strong positive impact, a minor impact, and a negative impact. So looking at this, we color code it and have it preferred, less preferred, or least preferred. So green being the strong positive, yellow being a minor impact, and obviously the orange or the red being a negative impact. So walking through the different aspects of each one of these solutions, both 2 and 3. So under the natural environment, the existing water storage, it's an existing water storage site. There's no esker impacts anticipated, no rare or at-risk wildlife. There's no waterways adjacent to the site. So there's minimal impacts from a natural environment perspective. Similar to option 3, we identified that there wasn't any esker impacts anticipated. Some impacts anticipated due to site clearing for the new standpipe, but minimal for that and the water main. There's no waterways adjacents and no rare or at-risk wildlife. So from a natural environment perspective, both of these generally had positive or very little impacts and were rated green or preferred. The social impacts, very similar because we are constructing a large tower into the air. So it's visible to nearby community. The option 2 has some impacts to the is in the well protection area for the existing wells at the water treatment plant. And obviously, when we're constructing this, there's obviously increased traffic, reduced air quality during construction, dust, things like that. And very similar on option 3, building it up the public works yard. The difference being there would be some major disruptions to traffic as we try and construct a water main along Highway 7 for the water main to come up and be able to feed that. So both had some sort of impacts, whether it to the social or cultural environment. So both of these were in the yellow, having some impacts. In the technical suitability, so under option 2, putting it at the water treatment plant, again, the new standpipe will provide the required treatment and distribution. We'll have minimal water main upgrades that are required. And there's already electrical power at the site, which is required for some mixing and things like that on the standpipe. On option 3, which is at the public works yard, it is at a higher elevation. So it means that the standpipe would have to be a shorter elevation overall. There would be some additional piping required at the water treatment plant because currently it uses some of the yard piping and the piping within the site right now as part of its contact time for chlorine. So it uses that piping and that pipe from the water treatment plant and part of the standpipe as a treatment process because it needs a certain amount of time in there to kill all the E. coli. So if we were to take that tank away from there, we would have to replace that amount of storage or that amount of contact time back. So we would have to install some additional piping within the treatment plant. There is a significant amount of water main that would need to be installed along, like I said, along Highway 7 to connect the new system. And then we would also have to have probably a new electrical feed or some configuration with a public works yard that would be a bit more difficult than that's at the current water treatment plant. So that being said, obviously option 2 had the preferred, as it did have very minimal impact because you already have a standpipe there, whereas putting it at the public works yard, it does have a fair amount of impacts with the water main and different aspects. So that was the least preferred. Financial considerations is always a big one. So we looked at it under option 2. This one has the moderate cost relative to option 3, because in option 3 we had it on the esker, so the actual standpipe itself would be able to be shorter. So the standpipe itself would be more expensive at the water treatment plant versus at the public works yard. However, that cost is offset by having very little water main installation requirements at the water treatment plant versus the additional water main extension and upsizing along Highway 7, as well as the additional piping required for the chlorine contact time at the water treatment plant. So when comparing overall, the option 2 at the existing water treatment plant had a better financial or a lower overall cost than building it at the public works yard. So kind of taking those all into consideration and looking at the different aspects of each one, kind of summarizing the preferred and less preferred. The preferred option for the alternatives was to build the new standpipe at the existing water treatment plant. It had the least amount of impacts and the best overall financial consideration. So currently is estimated for the construction of the new existing water treatment plant is approximately 2.9 million. That does include some engineering contingencies and some project management on that aspect in sort of 2021 numbers. So once we've identified the preferred solution, we do look at how that impacts the overall system during that process. And this is just kind of laying out some of those aspects. So using the hydraulic model, we looked at the preferred solution with that. And as you may have seen there on the original sketches we were showing under peak hour, we look at that peak hour, that 9 o'clock time frame, to look at how overall does this improve the pressures within the system during the peak hour. Before, we had 29% of the nodes that were below the 50 psi, 35 kPa, whereas under this situation we wouldn't have any. And under the max day or the fire flow requirements, we originally had 7% of the nodes that were less than 30 liters a second, and we're down to 2% of the nodes that would now have less than 30 liters per second. So again, it's finding that balancing and looking at how to improve the system to make it better and provide better level of service to the residents. So one of the other aspects that we always look at during these aspects, especially with the proposed alternative, is looking at the source water protection. Because the wells are right on the site, we are within that wellhead protection area, the vulnerable score of 10, because it's right at the plant. So a detailed hydrogeological and geotechnical study will have to be undertaken during the preliminary design. That would be needed to determine the geotechnical conditions on site to be able to build this, as well as looking at how it will be constructed and what impacts that may have. But quite manageable, and some mitigative measures can be implemented once those conditions are known. Like I said, once that's we've kind of come up with our preliminary preferred alternative, we consult with both agencies and the public. So within the report, we looked and we consulted with the Ministry of Conservation and Climate Change, or the MECP. The Ministry of Heritage, Sports, Tourism and Culture, the regions, the Conservation Authority, Hydro One, all of these we had consultation with to ensure that all of their requirements and different aspects were met. And then we held a public information center on October 4th and addressed any comments that anybody had during that. So looking at the project schedule, as I said, we started in July of 2021 with a study notice and worked our way through and wrapping up the Schedule B in February of 2022. Typically with these, you have to put out a notice of completion. Once a notice of completion is going out, the public and agencies have 30 days to comment. That 30 days was completed on February 19th. So we've received any comments that we're going to have at this point, and can now wrap up and close out the EA. The last thing kind of on this was put together some general project timelines of sort of the next steps. So once the EA is done, this allows you to move into the design aspect of building the new water tower. So under this, we have the preliminary and detailed design running about 12 months. By the time you finish the hydrogeological and geotechnical investigation, working with suppliers for the standpipe design and issuing and getting tender documents together and putting it out to contractors to build and things like that. Concurrently with that, obviously there's approvals, Conservation Authority, MECP, and others that will need to be obtained. And those would be done in concurrent with the design schedule. We have in here just tender and award, which takes typically by the time you put it out on the street and have contractors bid on it, it takes 3 to 4 weeks, and then get award to council and things like that takes about 2 months. And the anticipated construction window is about 12 to 18 months, depending on sort of when you start and supply chain issues and all of those other aspects that kind of work into that time frame. And that's sort of the presentation that we had here. So I will open it up to any questions that you may have had or.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. You quit sharing your screen. We'll get everybody back on board. Yeah, that's pretty in-depth. Thank you very much for that. So I'll open it up at this time for questions from council. Anybody have any comments they'd like to make on the report so far? Okay, Councillor Walsh, please. I see a hand.
Yeah, just a couple of questions if I can through you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's well laid out. Just a couple of questions if I can. The issue being that we're at the source water protection area and have that vulnerability score of 10. 10 being very high, 10 like what's kind of the high end of that score?
It does identify it as being high. That 10 is a high score.
Okay.
And it's just based strictly on location.
Okay.
And nothing, it doesn't take into account what we're doing or how we're doing it or anything like that. It just means that more consultation would be required with the Conservation Authority to mitigate those aspects.
Okay. And then the second question I had, if I can, through you, Mayor, is what will then happen to our current water storage tower if we proceed with putting the new tower at the current location proposed?
That'll be a question for Candace on that one.
Yeah, I think that Candace can handle that one. We didn't touch on that in this. So.
No, that's the $1 million question. So we haven't determined exactly what would be the final outcome with the current tower.
Okay.
Kyle and I have chatted about potentially keeping it, but there is an opportunity to obviously capitalize on the return of the investment by divesting ourselves of the asset and selling it to another municipality and recouping some of the upfront infrastructure costs of building the new storage unit. Mm-hmm. There was chatter about keeping it as far as redundancy goes. So when this tower needs to be put out of commission in the future for refurbishment, we have the ability to do that. But there is operational challenges with running them, with twinning them and keeping operationally not ideal to run them in tandem and have a twinning tower situation on our hands. But I don't want to just sit here today. I want to focus on the EA as far as unequivocally having a straight out answer for council. That'll all be determined in the next phases of the project.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I think all of us are, take the water seriously in the town, and I have a couple questions, if I may. One, if the existing standpipe services 2,100 people in Norwood, what would the service capacity of a new standpipe be, and how long would this asset, what would be the life expectancy of the new asset?
So typically, I mean, you would maintain every 10 years, you have to do an inspection on the tower, but your typical life expectancy of a tower like this is probably, I mean, anywhere from 50 to 75 years is typically what these things will last. But there is some variables to that. That's sort of what their typical sort of guidelines are.
And a second one, if I may, for you, Mayor. The second one is, do we know what the status would be for any federal or provincial funding to help with building this new asset? That might be for Candace.
And if council remembers, back in the fall, township staff submitted an application to the ICIP green funding stream. The province nominated our project up to the federal government, so we have received approval from the province. The consultant stated we have a budget of approximately $2.9 million. Of that, we are looking at about 74% funding from the federal and provincial government, which would leave approximately 26% for the township to fund. The goal would be to have that funded through development charges in order to have the users of the system not incur any costs for the asset. So it would either be provincial and federal funding or development charges that we collect during the planning and development phases. As of right now, we haven't heard from the federal government in regards to the final decision on the ICIP green, but based on a conversation with the Minister of Infrastructure, she was meeting with the federal Minister of Infrastructure to advocate to ensure that these projects are announced prior to the election. Whether we see that or not, we are in the politicians' hands, but all in all, I'm confident that the federal government will be approving the project.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Burke, please.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor, thank you for the report. I write a lot of questions on sticky notes, and as they get asked, I throw my sticky notes on the floor beside me. So thank you to the councillors ahead of me who asked the questions and those who were answered. So I guess so we're looking at 2.9 million in funding, and that is today's funding, right? So certainly looking, 2 to 3 years in advance, chances are it's certainly going to be higher than that. So I guess a question I have, and again, you're finding a balance between the water in the tower that is used and for fire. So trying to find that balance, and obviously you hope for the best and really do your best to avoid a worst case scenario. So do we have any redundancy or a mitigation process in place in order to maybe secure that stable water system for the next couple of years? We know new houses are coming on board and that sort of thing. So I guess that would be one question. In an emergency situation, what's the mitigation plan? And hopefully we don't have that in place. And then just a question with the wellhead protection. When you go through the approval process, I assume that is also part of the approval process with the source water protection. I'm on that committee, and sometimes those requirements and those approvals seem to take a long time. So I was wondering if that is also part of the approval system.
I can answer that one and say that, yeah, that was generally our anticipated was that 6 to 12 month process of getting all of those approvals. So starting early in the detailed design of identifying those approvals, getting on, do pre-consultation with those aspects, and making sure that those permits fall into place as the design is furthered as well. In terms of the contingency plan, I don't know, maybe Kyle or Candace, I don't know if you guys want to talk to that.
Yeah, I can talk to that, Lori. So essentially, I mean, we can only store so much water. We can only pump so much water. Typically in times where Daryl's using water, we're working together, kind of going back and forth. So I've always got an eye on the tower. We do have dry hydrants in the township now, which, so I mean, if we're starting to get touch and go on the tower, then they're definitely an option. But yeah, that's about it as far as contingency. I mean, we typically try to keep the tower rate full all the time so that we're not, if something does happen, if we had a main break and a fire, that's what might put us into that situation. But yeah, as far as that, we've got alarms and everything on pressures and levels and etc. So, but yeah, the dry hydrants, they can be a savior as well. You know, we haven't had an issue yet where we're in a pickle, but you know, it definitely could happen.
Oh, sorry, Daryl, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dale. You're muted, sir. Still muted.
In the past, we've had instances where the hydrants can't keep up with their water. So we've instituted a tanker shuttle to a secure source. So we have that option also. We can rely on both ways through the hydrants and with the tanker shuttle.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know.
All right. I guess I just had a couple things, nothing too drastic, but in one of the notes there, it says cathodic protection. I believe that's something like in a hot water tank. It's probably an anode rod that takes in certain chemicals in the water, and they'll eat that before it eats the inside of the tank out. I take it, something like that. So, okay. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a sacrificial cathode protection that draws in that rust inhibiting aspect. So we maintain the tank, and then we can change out those cathode protection as it absorbs it and rusts and deteriorates in that piece. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a maintenance piece that makes it easier, I guess. So,
Yep.
As a side note, they were never installed on the original standpipe, so there is some corrosion occurring, but yeah.
Yeah, that was where I was heading on that one. So just a question then for staff, and as far as you, Matthew, too, then. So we've talked about several different options here, and it appears to me that the one option that makes perfect sense is where the water tower or the standpipe is now. You don't have to create a road. You don't have to do like change the water main coming down the highway and one thing after another. Is that part of a recommendation of looking at the other options to just to go ahead and look at the one option that makes sense? Is that what we're leading with this as far as the meeting today with council is? We'd like to answer that one.
I mean, I can say from an EA perspective, yeah, that we go through this process and evaluate that and then come to a final determination. And then within the municipal class environmental assessment framework, there is a phase 4 and 5. So phase 4 is the design and 5 is construction. So that means you can move into the design and construction once this EA is completed.
Okay.
So yes, in theory, we would be looking for council to support the findings of the EA and the location that's being recommended. As far as any financial contributions, no, that is not what we're looking for today. That'll come forward in design and when we hear back from the federal government in regards to the grants, and we have to determine how we're going to fund the municipal portion. So today, I think we're just going to be looking in principle if council agrees to the recommended location and the findings in the EA in order to move forward into the next step of detailed design.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so to me, just another comment is I think we need to get on to our Minister of Infrastructure again and just give her another highlight to ask her if she's heard anything back from the feds to get us online, because if it's going to take 2 to 3 years to get this going and it's already that much money in 2021 numbers, you can just imagine what it's going to be like in 2024 numbers. So,
well, we do hope to see the price of steel coming down with some certain international factors that are driving the price of steel right now. So that number does take that into consideration. Okay. It is a product that obviously relies heavily on steel. We're not looking at a bunch of, a lot of other factors, really. It's just a lot of steel. So we need the price of steel to come down. That'll hopefully assist that cost. And hopefully the price of steel comes down enough with the international factors that are driving it, that it'll compensate for any CPI increase annually. So hopefully we may come in fairly close to the same number, even in 2 or 3 years, as long as the price of steel cooperates.
Right. And just one thing further than I was thinking was just for anybody that may be watching us via YouTube or even council, that like there's still more to come on this, basically, because we still have to have more studies possibly to see actually how big the new standpipe has to be for that design and one thing after another. So that's not in the works at this particular moment. I take it it's so once we get through this certain phase, then we'll know more probably with another meeting how much bigger the tank's going to be and meters height and meters width and one thing after another.
There
Yeah,
is a
once we get a final
preliminary-
design, yeah.
And the final's done. There's preliminary numbers that are included today. So we do have a preliminary understanding or at least an idea of the potential of what the new tower will need to be for sizing, but none of that is finalized until the final detailed design. And then obviously there has to be a full-on procurement process to support both of those initiatives.
Right. Thank you. Councilor Ward, I seen your hand up, I believe.
Yes, through you, one more question if I may, and I think I do know the answer, but the servicing solution number 2, and it says redundant water main. Could you explain to anyone that's maybe listening what a redundant water main is in that servicing solution number 2? It's on page 19.
Yeah, so that was to ensure that you can, in order to compare what we say apples to apples in terms of redundancy, what we want to make sure is that you have the ability to isolate both the water treatment plant and the standpipe. So it's adding an extra water main in there to make sure that if you had a water main break, because right now the way it works, there's a single water main that goes out to the distribution system, is adding a second one in there. If you had a water main break in that section of pipe, you'd lose both your standpipe and your water treatment plant. This would allow us to put in a second one to make sure that if there was a break in that existing main, we have another redundant main that can still provide water to the village.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Right. And just to follow up on that then too, and I know we're getting technical now, but Kyle, when you had to scrub that other or our existing tank or whatever, you had to run a loop of some sort. Would that help as far as keeping water pressure up in the village if our standpipe had to be maintained, or the new one that's being put in 10 years from now? Does that create a loop for us too, that you don't have to panic so much about to get the water into evidence if the tank has to be shut down to work on it, say?
Sorry, if we went to 2 tanks or just we had 1 tank?
No, if you lost the tank, to put it into a pressurized system to be able to lose the tank and still feed the distribution system, he's asking if we have the ability to do that.
Not currently, no. We'd have to set up for a pressurized system. Booster pumps, additional storage up on the hill for some cushioning for fire protection, that kind of thing.
So that redundant line wouldn't create a loop for us then, for you?
No.
Just protects the water main. So if one goes out, we have another one.
Yeah.
But if the tower comes out, that's a whole other scenario.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to get too technical at this time until we get more into the weeds later in life. So, all right. Any other questions from council at this time? Anybody got any other comments or concerns? All right. Thank you, Matthew, for what you've done for us in the last year or so. So the recommendation for the motion then today is that the township supports the Schedule B municipal class environmental assessment as presented. Motion by.
No, Mayor.
Candace, go ahead.
Sorry, to circle back to the conversation that we just had in regards to council supporting the findings of the EA and in principle, the recommended location, et cetera. So not just for information, please, if possible.
Yeah, no, yeah, sorry, you're absolutely right. Deputy Mayor Burt, you want to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion with including the servicing solution number 2.
Yeah, thanks, Candace.
Or however Melanie would like to word it.
Well, let's have Candace word it for us then, and then we'll have that motion down, and then we'll have it straight. Go ahead. Recommendation, please.
This payback for noticing the error. Okay, that the council of the township of Asphodel-Norwood accepts the presentation from J.L. Richards for information, and further that the council of the township of Asphodel-Norwood approves in principle the scenario as presented in option 2. and further that the council of the township of Asphodel-Norwood approves the location of the proposed new water tower to be the existing location of the water treatment plant at, I think it's 52 Ridge,
42.
42 Ridge.
Excellent. Thank you. Lori, you couldn't have said it any better, I'm sure. So Lori's made the motion, seconded by Councillor Walsh. Is there any other discussion on the motion then? No hands. All right, all in favor. Great, thank you. And thank you very much, Matthew, to JL Richards. That's awesome. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on then, and thank you, Candace. There's no putting you on the spot, that's for sure. R3 then would be Ed Whitmore, our Chief Building Official Planning Coordinator. This report is regarding the consent B10-22 Carmichael. Ed, the
Okay.
floor is yours, sir.
Okay. I thought we were gonna
Hold it, hold it
I
a
thought we
second.
were gonna jump into the planning.
Yeah, actually, we have to. Sorry, Ed. We're gonna have to put you on hold here for a minute. I just noticed the time. So I'm gonna have to ask council then that we have a motion to suspend our regular council meeting, enter into a public meeting for 2 p.m. today. The motion by Councillor Walsh, seconded by Councillor War. All in favor? And then that's carried. Okay, so our meeting is suspended now, our regular council meeting. So today is Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022. The time is 2:02 p.m. This meeting's being electronically recorded and streamed through our township's YouTube channel. So anyone that's watching, welcome. We have abundance of staff here and our council, a whole entourage of councils here, and welcome to everyone that is joining our meeting. At this time, I'll ask if there's any declaration of pecuniary interest. All right, seeing no hands. Is there a motion that I need, Candace, for adoption of the agenda?
You can, sure. That'd be
Yep.
lovely.
Thank you. I'll have a motion then to adopt the agenda as presented, please. Deputy Mayor Burt, seconded by Councillor War. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We've already went through the declaration and no one put their hand up. So now the notification then, I'll allow Ed there. Then it's report R1 zoning bylaw amendment Zubla 01-2022 Carter. So go ahead, Ed. You start us off with all the notification and one thing after another there, please, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Okay, back in, let's see, September the 14th was the last time this came to council in 2021, and that was the consent application for this severance. And council approved the recommendation back then. And at that time, the consent application was for 250 meters of frontage and an area of approximately 4.25 hectares, which is about 10.5 acres. What they were doing was severing off the surplus dwelling that was surplus to farming operations and just squaring it up with the field over to the lot lines. And that's why the parcel of land was the size that it was. So council recommended approval September the 14th. And it went to county council, or not to county council, it went back to the county. And there was a discussion with the County of Peterborough Planning Department with the staff there, and they were not going to support this severance. So they weren't, because they figured that the parcel of land was too large to meet the requirements, because there's a sentence in there that requires the property to be only the size necessary to create that severance for a lot, like a surplus dwelling. So they were going to recommend to deny the application. And fearing that, I worked with the county staff to come up with a solution of a smaller parcel of land because I did not want the severance to be lost, and I consulted with the property owner, and we got the parcel size down to 75 meters by 175 meters. And so that's what is before you today. And it's not ideal for the purchaser of the property that it would be sold to. It's not ideal for the landowner, the farming owner of this property. It's not ideal for us, but it is a solution that worked for the county, that they would support the application. So having reduced it in that size down to about 3.2 acres, county staff supported the application, and therefore it was approved December 10th in 2021. And it was subject to the conditions. The main condition was a final survey come back showing that the severed parcel is no larger than 75 meters by 175 meters on a survey. So that's what we're dealing with today, and that's why we have the size the way that it is today. And now that you have that background information, now you'll be able to see where we're going with the zoning bylaw amendment. Candace just had a question here.
Yeah, it's not really a question. I just wanted to circle back with council to our meeting last Thursday in regards to the conversation we had about agricultural properties and sizing and what we're seeing that the market needs and what the future of agriculture needs, and how decisions like this that staff had to be flexible and turn on a dime, which Ed did, to ensure that the property owner got their severance. But bottom line is we're left with a parcel that the township really isn't overly supportive of. It needed to be larger. It should have been larger. And it's really important that we get that official plan right, so that we allow those agricultural properties, when we have surplus dwellings and farm consolidations, that we're left with parcels that are going to support the agriculture community instead of automatically turning them back into the residential fold. So just wanted to circle back this conversation back to Thursday's conversation with council, so you can start to see that puzzle coming together in real life versus just hypothetical conversations all the time. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I think there's a space, Deputy Mayor. I seen your hand, but I think we'll be talking about this and asking questions after we get to that formal part. Okay.
Yep, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll wait.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Ed. Finish up there, sir.
Okay, so having said that, council approved the consent in September 14, 2021, and then the land division approving the consent. We are at the zoning stage. So having worked out the paperwork with the owner, this is going to rezone the severed lands from the agricultural zone to a rural residential exception 15 zone. And that will allow a hobby farm with 75 meters of frontage and an area of about 1.312 hectares, about 3.24 acres in size. This rezoning amendment will also rezone the retained lands from the agricultural zone to agricultural exception 10 zone, which will prohibit residential uses and also recognize a lot area of approximately 38 hectares, which is 93.9 acres thereabouts. And there's a tiny, very small portion of EP environmental protection lands or zone that at the very rear of the property. There's no change to the environmental protection zone. It's all going to remain the same. So this zoning bylaw amendment is applicable to the lands known as 1943 Asphodel 11th line, and it's municipal roll number 1501-010-003 21800, concession 11, part lot 12 in the township of Asphodel-Norwood. We included the zoning bylaw amendment application and the notice of complete application and the notice of public meeting, which was sent to all the property owners within 120 meters of the subject site It was posted on the township website. It was posted on the property itself. And it was also circulated to all the various agencies that we circulate. There is no financial implications, and for the relation to the strategic plan, this is just provincial legislation for zoning requirements, the Planning Act requirements, and we engage our communities and the citizens through the circulation. So in the engagement, we really didn't receive any comments or concerns from anybody. The Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board and the County Public Works Department and Autonomy Region Conservation Authority, they emailed and said they had no concerns with the zoning bylaw amendment. And no other written concerns have been received from any property owners or anybody else.
Okay.
So in the conclusion, it appears to comply with the growth plan, the Greater Golden Horseshoe policies, the official plan policies, township official plan policies after the zoning is completed. And there's a 20-day appeal period to this zoning. And if no appeals are received by March 14th, the zoning amendment would become final and binding. And I should read those two special clauses about if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the township of Asphodel-Norwood before the bylaws passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the township of Asphodel-Norwood to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And also, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the township of Asphodel-Norwood before the bylaws passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. And that is it for my report.
Okay, thank you, Ed. So at this time then for meeting record, I'll ask the CAO if there's anybody in attendance to speak in support or in opposition of this application. Is there
No,
anybody?
Mayor, there's no one in attendance for or against.
Okay, so asking twice, asking 3 times, no one's available to make comments, so that's great. Thank you very much. And now I'll open it up to council. Deputy Mayor Burt, you had your hand up earlier, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you for your report, Ed. Yeah, as I read through the report, and I kind of bookmark these types of files, and I look back and notice that this was smaller, and I just assumed that it was the landowner, the owner of the property, that wanted to put it back. So as you're speaking, I put in my notes with a big star, OP, and it just goes to show how very, very important it is that something that will work in our township may not work in others, and how important it is to push this issue forward, because I think from every severance we've done, that is what we wanted to do and we've been unable to do. And so thank you for making it go through. Yes, it's not perfect, but yeah, when I originally saw it and looked back on my notes, I thought, oh, they've changed their mind. So it's interesting that that you had to go through that process. So just a comment, not a question. And and that's it. And I can make the motion if required at this time.
All right, thanks. Ed, do you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, we could have possibly tried to not do this alteration, and when the county planning staff refused it, we could have had you, the mayor, and you, the deputy mayor, fight this battle at county council, because anytime there's an issue with a severance, it has to go to the county council to make that decision. I just didn't want that to be a really big issue. And what if we lost the decision? And so I just came with the best solution that I thought would work for today, type of thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Burt, respond.
Just to follow up on that. So Ed, if you had gone to that and lost it, could the landowner go back and do the solution you've done now, or would it have made it more difficult? I'm just not sure the process there.
He would have to start all over again and pay the fees all over again.
Okay.
Any other comments on this subject in our public meeting from council? Any other hands? All right, seeing no hands then. So the meeting record, and you've read that off, Ed, that's required of us. So anyone to be notified if they want persons must make a written request to the Township of Asphodel-Norwood if there's a problem. So the recommendation then today would be that, and I'll read this for you, that the Council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood accepts this report regarding Dubla 01-2022 Carter, and further that the Council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood direct staff to prepare a bylaw that will rezone the severed lands from agricultural A zone to residential exception 15 RR-15 zone, and will rezone the retained lands agricultural A zone to agricultural exception 10 A-10 zone with no change to the existing environmental protection EP zone. It's a mouthful, but I'm looking for a motion on that, please. Deputy Mayor Burt, seconded by Councillor Archer. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing no hands, then all in favor. That's carried. Thank you very much. So now, Council, I'm looking for an adjournment to this public meeting on today, February 22nd, 2022, be adjourned at 2:17 p.m. and that we return to our regular meeting of council and have it resume. So I need a motion for that. Councillor Walsh, seconded by Councillor War. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Welcome back. We're back to our regular meeting. So our three on our agenda, Ed, you're still on board. He's our Chief Building and Official Planning Coordinator. And this one is regarding a consent B-10-22 Carmichael. Please, Ed, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So the application for consent B-10-22 was submitted to the County of Peterborough Land Division by EcoView Consulting Services, and they're acting on behalf of DPH Developments, Inc. DPH Development Inc. Incorporated, they've entered into an agreement to purchase and sale with the current owner being Carmichael's. So the purpose of the application is to allow the severance of a parcel of land having a frontage of approximately 20 meters and an area of approximately 14 hectares. So the 20 meters is the 66 feet at the end of Albine Street. That's the width of the Albine Street road allowance. There was a previous road widening done in order to create that in phase 2. In order to create that width of the road allowance. And the area of 14 hectares is about 34.6 acres. So the effect of the application is to create a new residential parcel of land. And this is for a plan of subdivision. It'll be Norwood Park Phase 4. The construction is applicable to lands described as 158 Albine Street and municipal roll number 1501-010. 003-05700, and it's concession 8, part lot 18 and 19 in the township of Asphodel-Norwood. So the retained portion of lands will remain an agricultural parcel having frontage of approximately 0 meters, so that's 0 feet, and a lot area of approximately 41.4 hectares. That's 102 acres in size. And the reason that it would have 0 meters is that this parcel of land being severed is in front of the retained parcel. And so it almost creates a landlocked situation. And that is why we're going to have a special condition for approval in the recommended municipal appraisal form. So the retained parcel having 0 feet of frontage, of street frontage. So this would create a landlocked parcel of land. One of the recommended conditions of approval on the municipal appraisal form will be that the extension of Albine Street will have to be surveyed, deeded to the township and brought up to a township standards, or they have to enter into an agreement to the satisfaction of the township, and all associated costs are the responsibility of the developer. And so the reason that or enter into an agreement to the satisfaction of the township is just so everything can proceed in a timely manner and not have to get all hung up just on the road part of it. As long as we end up that everything is to the satisfaction of the township, that's what is the main requirement. In September 2021, council recommended approval of the official plan amendment number 65. And that's what brought the subject lands into the settlement area, Norwood settlement area. And so the county of Peterborough approved the official plan amendment. It went through in November of 2021. And so the next step is for this consent to go through. And then the next step or another step would be to go through a zoning bylaw amendment to specifically rezone the different portions of that property. And just for every information, more or less for purposes, the consent will create a parcel of land for an additional 148 dwelling units, consisting of 96 single detached dwellings on various sizes of lots and 52 townhouses. So the density is getting up there what the province wants. So we're going to have some 50-foot lots. We're going to have some 40-foot lots. We're going to have some 45-foot lots for the singles, and then 52 townhouses, which is a first for Norwood. This is a really good development, and it's much needed housing. And so for attachments, we included the application and the notice of application and the planning justification report, just if anybody wanted to go through that as well. So final financial implications, all costs are borne by the developer. And at the time of writing the report, there was no engagement from the public on our part, because the consultation part of it is done through the county of Peterborough. But I did have Mr. Walt McIsaac of Keeler Court. He emailed Ann Hamilton, which ended up forwarding it on to me. And the east lot line of the consent application, which is a tree line of mature trees, he has written concerns that he doesn't want to see the mature trees taken down. And he's had discussions with the DPH Developments Inc. regarding this, and he's spoken with Ann Hamilton about this as well. And also I had a call, I spoke on the phone this morning with Mr. Fox about a property line questions, and he's resolved his questions and concerns at this time. So there's at this time, there's no issues regarding that. And so for just sort of for information on the trees and that type of thing, the developer will have to, generally they will keep mature trees that are outside of their development area of the footprint and grading and that type of stuff, and they will be planting trees. Any trees lost, Candace has advised me that there is a tree plan bylaw or policy where if you take a tree down, you have to replace a tree. So if you take 30 trees down, you got to plant 30 new trees. So we have a very large proposed park area with this. And we have a stormwater retention pond area that will have some landscaping with some trees done there too, plus on some of the lots. So there may be, it's not at this time for us to talk about the trees, but there may be trees that are removed that some people don't want removed. And there may be some trees that are left exactly as is. It all depends on the, moving forward, how the subdivision is going to be shaped. And I think that's about it as far as everything goes on my report. The municipal appraisal form was attached. If there's any questions, there's just wording on that for how it, what kind of a clause is put in there. It's more or less the exact same repeat sentence, saying that they have to survey the Albine Street, they have to bring it up to a municipal standard, and they have to, or enter into an agreement to the satisfaction of the township. And this is all due to not creating a landlocked parcel of land, being the retained parcel. And so I'll answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Ed. I believe Candace, you wanted to highlight something for us there.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, to circle back to the trees, we ran into this in phase 2 on the west end as well. And we walked the property line, township staff walked it with the contractor, and they were able to save trees that I think potentially wouldn't have been saved if the intent of the township wasn't brought forward. So township staff will take the initiative and ensure that that is communicated, as well as the tree policy to ensure that any trees that are taken down are replaced. But to reiterate what Ed said, I do foresee that there is a potential here that trees will come down, that the new residents in phase 3 do not want to see come down on the west side. To circle back to the landlocked piece, the condition of the consent, it will be through agreement. The agreement will be brought forward to council. The conveyance of that extension or road allowance will need to happen sooner in the process than what we traditionally see. So traditionally, we see the conveyance of road allowances a little bit later in the process. The conveyance of the Albine Street extension to the township, so it comes into the township's fold, which will become part of Peter's domain, will happen much, much sooner in the process. That agreement will not bring the Albine Street extension up to final top coat asphalt out of the gate. That will not be the intent. Obviously, that'll be the final condition of the extension, but we don't want to see that road all beat up during the construction phases of phase 4. So the extension will be built, it'll be brought up to a municipal standard, but the final asphalt, et cetera, will be done once the subdivision is built out to a point where that asset is not degraded unnecessarily through the construction practices as they're building up that phase. Just wanted to add that little bit for council. Thanks, Mayor.
Yep, thank you. Any questions or comments from council at this time? Councillor Walsh, please.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, and thank you to both Ed and Candace regarding the trees. And I think it will be nice if we can walk that property line with the developer. I know we can replace a tree for a tree, but a 15, 20-year growing tree replaced with a brand new tree is not the same. So realize we probably can't save them all, but hopefully we can get the message across that we can save some of those trees along that back fence line that are reasonable, that we can. Obviously, I know we can't potentially save them all, but I think as long as we can work together, that we want to save some of those trees, because it's nice to say we can replace that tree, but you're not going to get the same maturity level and height of a tree that will replace it with whom what's there. So as long as we can work together, I think that's fair.
Good comment. Any other comments at this time from council? All right, seeing no hands. I'll just remind council, depending on the angle of your camera, I may not be able to see all your hands at a particular time when we're doing a motion. So if you can try to put your hand up closer to your chin or so that we can actually make note of that, I'd appreciate that a little better just going forward. So, all right. So at this time, then the recommendation for the motion then would be that the Council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood accepts this report regarding consent B10-22 Carmichael for information, and further that the Council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood direct staff to provide the municipal appraisal form to the County of Peterborough Land Division. Motioned by Councillor War, seconded by Councillor Walsh. Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Thanks for the hands. I've seen them all that time. All right, so R4 then, thank you very much, Ed, for that.
You're welcome.
R4 would be Peter Deshane, our Manager of Public Works and Environmental Services. And Peter, this report is regarding a half-ton, I guess, 4x4 crew cab pickup truck tender results. Peter, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you. So on February 7th, we received some tenders there at the office for the pickup truck for the purchase of a 2022 half-ton pickup truck. And they were opened at 12 noon on the 7th of February. We actually only received one tender from JJ Stewart Motors, totaling $55,652.50. That includes HST. And that's for a 2022 half-ton pickup truck that will replace our current 2008 half-ton pickup truck. It's expected that we would receive delivery of this new vehicle 6 to 9 months from now, or from the date of award. When they order the truck, things are rather slow right now in that industry, I understand. So it may be some time before we receive it. And once we do get it, then it'll be outfitted with a back rack, flashing lights, the road watch system, and the GPS system from ACE. And it'll strictly be doing road patrol. Financial implications, we budgeted $50,000 in the 2022 budget. So that basically just covers the cost of the pickup truck, and then we have to outfit it with the stuff the accessories we mentioned above there. So we'll be looking for an additional $5,000, which would be transferred from the Public Works Capital Equipment Reserve. So in conclusion, we're recommending that council allow us to purchase this truck from JJ Stewart Motors.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Any comments or concerns from council at this time on this tender process? Deputy Mayor Burt, please.
Just a comment. How odd is it, and this might be more for Candace, that we would only receive one application for a pickup truck, because there's, a number of dealers in the area. So has that happened before, just getting one?
It has. Traditionally, we have seen more when it comes to pickup trucks and vehicles. We did advise other dealerships that this tender opportunity was available, so they were aware of it. But I think a lot of it boils down that there's just not the supply.
Yeah,
there's just not the supply. And we do have a local dealership here that supports the community. So I think the other dealerships are aware of that as well. But we have received only one in the past. We've had, I think the maximum we've ever received for a vehicle of this type was 3, but we've received one many times.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from council? I have one comment or one question, I guess. When you mentioned about the extra pieces for the $5,000, that we don't necessarily need to make that in the motion, though, I would assume, Candace. Yeah, because first of all, we wouldn't want to hold you to that if it's still 8 or 9 months out. And second, I think the recommendation just has the truck in it. So, but and I think everything else would be operational. That wouldn't even probably come to council because it's in your.
It's within procurement, so staff will address it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thanks. Just clarification, that's all. All right, thank you. So then no questions, I guess, right now, but the recommendation for the motion then would be that we receive this report for the tender process for this 2022 half-ton 4x4 crew cab, and further that the council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood approve the purchase of this truck for $49,250, excluding HST, from JJ Stewart Motors. I need a motion by Councillor Walsh, seconded by Deputy Mayor Burt. Any other comments or questions on the motion? Seeing no hands, all in favor. Hands high, please. Perfect. I've seen them all. Thank you. All right, Peter, that's great. You say the price fast. It doesn't sound as expensive. So All right, R5 then, Peter, once again, this report is regarding an RFP results for the engineering services for the annual monitoring program at the Norwood Landfill Transfer Station and Asphodel Waste Disposal Site. The floor is
Yes.
yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Mayor. So again, on February 7th at 12 noon, we received RFPs for the landfill monitoring from consulting firms, and they were opened at that time. This contract will be a 5-year term, and we are required to do this in order that we are compliant with the MECP and our ECA certificates that we currently have for both these sites. So at the Norwood transfer station / landfill site, there'll be a short period of time until we get the closure in place where we'll still need to do a topography survey on a yearly basis to ensure that we are compliant with our with the volume that we're allowed to put in there. And at both sites, there'll be a collection of both groundwater and surface water, and those samples will be analyzed for certain criteria that's spelled out in the ECA documents that we have. So moving on, the results of the RFP are as follows. So DM Wills is coming in at about a total of $174,805 for the 5-year term, and that's approximately $35,000 a year. GHT was second. Coincidentally, GHT is currently doing our landfill monitoring. They come in second with the with $195,580 for the 5-year term, and Cambium came in third with $220,472. We should also note that the financial component of the RFP was about worth about 35% of the score, so fairly substantial. So the financial implications are that the cost of the consulting service to complete the annual landfill monitoring for both sites in 2022 will be approximately $32,275, which is within our approved environmental budget of $38,500. And the total cost of the 5-year term, like I said before, was $174,805. Approximately equal to $30,500 a year, and we will budget accordingly moving forward. So in conclusion, we would like council to accept our recommendation to retain DM Wills to satisfy the components of the which have satisfied the components of the RFP, and to carry out the landfill monitoring for both sites in Norwood.
All right, thanks for the recommendation there. Council, any comments, concerns, questions? Deputy Mayor Burt, please.
Just a quick question. How many more years or perhaps decades will we be monitoring the Asphodel one on the 5th line? How far are we into that, and how many more years do we have to go?
Sorry, thank you, and through you, Mayor. I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head. It may be spelled out in the ECA. I don't recall seeing that when I read through it right. To be honest, that doesn't come to mind, but it really depends on what your ECA says. You're kind of bound by that. So I can check into that. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
That's quite all right. I could have emailed you, but I'm sure you can get back to us on that. So thank you.
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So if you do email back with the question, if you email all of us or just CC us, that would be great. Then Peter too. Yep. So Councillor Ward, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Peter, for that. I just wanted one comment. So the 5 years, is that normal to get a 5-year term? And I think one thing that I think is great, you know, the cost for the next 5 years for that monitoring. And I just wanted to know if 5 years was the term that is always done, but I think it's great for budgeting going forward that it's 5 years. We know exactly what the amount will be.
Thank you, and through your mayor. Yeah, so the current contract was 3 years. And we just felt that in a 5-year term, you're going to get better pricing because they know they're going to have the work for the next 5 years. And on top of that, we know what to budget for the next 5 years. So it's a kind of a win-win situation for both us and the consulting firm. So I think it's the better route. And when you have consistency, I think it's better too, the longer you have consistency.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anyone else have a question or concern? All right. I just wanted to clarify that when you do reply back to Deputy Mayor Burt, that it'll only be for information. It's not that we're going to carry on business of the township behind the scenes with emails. It's mostly for information from the question. Thanks. All right.
Mayor,
Any other? Yes, go ahead.
I can state that the Asphodel landfill closed in 2010. So the mandatory inspection period goes out to 2035. That's the bare minimum, and we'll be lucky if we are off the hook in 2035. So just expect that it's part of ongoing operations until none of us are sitting at this table anymore. But I'm sure Peter will send further information in his email.
Well, Peter, you're going to be here forever, aren't you? Come on. No, that's great. Yeah, I know in the study, and then if they find something that they don't like, then they may have to take it further. They may up costs. We may have to drill more wells for monitoring. It just goes on and on and on. So it just never ends. So anyway, so any other questions or concerns? I asked that already. I didn't see any hands. So then let me see where I'm at here. Yeah, R5 that we're on right now. So the information we want, the recommendation, Peter basically explained it to us already, but we want to receive this for information, and that we allow the award go to for a 5-year contract to DM Wills Engineering. And further, that we authorize myself, the mayor, and the clerk to execute the agreement. So I need a motion by Councillor War, seconded by Councillor Archer. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor? And then that's carried. Thank you very much. All right, R6 now we're on to, and we're going to allow Peter to talk about this one too, since it's part of his department. Surplus equipment would be R6, Public Works Department. Peter, the floor is yours, sir. Put you on the spot, eh?
Sorry, I just have to pull the report up here.
You're allowed.
Thank you. Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So we do have some equipment here in 2022 that we'd like to declare surplus as a result of purchasing new equipment or replacement equipment. So as per the township's procurement and disposal policy, to the treasurer approving the disposal of an asset, council needs to declare the asset surplus. So that's why we're bringing this report forward. The 2021 budget approved the purchase of a new slide-in water tank, which we received in 2021, and it is in operation, not currently, but it was in operation this summer. And so we'd like to declare the plastic water tank as surplus that currently resides in the yard. Just a little bit of background too there. The 2021 tank was awarded to Husky Farm Equipment for the purchase of a 12,000 liter slide-in tank, and we did receive it. Also, this year is the purchase of a 2022 4x4 pickup truck. So we would like to declare the 2008 2x4 pickup truck as surplus once we receive it. And in 2021, we also purchased or awarded a contract to Bob Mark New Holland for the purchase of a new wheeled excavator. Due to supply issues and delivery issues, we don't actually have the excavator yet. It is in Campbellford. We have seen it. It is here. So we should be receiving it within the next very short period. So we would like to, as a result of that, we'd like to declare our current wheeled excavator, I think it's a 2001 Volvo, as surplus. So the above assets will be disposed of utilizing the online auction process of GovDeals, which we've used in the past. Financial impacts, any proceeds resulting from the sale of these assets will be allocated to the Public Works Department as per the 2022 budget. So in conclusion, the declaration of surplus of the 2008 pickup truck, the 2001 Volvo excavator, and the slide-in water tank is required prior to the treasurer approving the disposal of these assets. And we have used GovDeals in the past, so that's what we'd like to move forward with, as we have received positive results.
Thank you, Peter. That's a good report. So that's basically the motion right there, Council. That's what's recommended from staff going forward. Would someone like to make a motion on that then, please? Okay, Councillor Archer, seconded by Councillor Walsh. Is there any other discussion on this disposal of the surplus? All right, seeing no hands, all in favor then, please. Okay, thank you. Very good. And thank you very much, Peter. And keep up the good work out there in the country and one thing after another, and try to have some more Snicker bars and get some rest, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, R7 then, Kyle Beacock, our wastewater operations manager. This report, sir, is regarding the 2021 Schedule 22 and Section 11 summary reports. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. All right, through you, Mayor. Yeah, it's that time of year again. I can't believe it. Just deja vu. It feels like I just did these, but anyways. So these are the annual, the Section 11 annual reports and the Schedule 22 annual summary reports for the municipalities. The Schedule 22 reports are essentially, they list the requirements of the Act, regulations, anything where we deviated outside of that. They also give us an idea of the flows that we had compared to our rated capacity, which allows us to make decisions going forward. And also the Section 11 annual reports, which are basically, they're a summary of all the sampling throughout the year and all the residuals, kind of any adverses, all that kind of stuff. So I won't go through them verbatim, but we're essentially looking for council to acknowledge the receipt of these reports for information and accept these reports. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
All right, that's the basis of our motion going forward. Is there any questions from council or any comments? Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks, Kyle, in-depth report. I did have a couple questions. One, would you explain to me what a grab sample is and where you would do, I just saw it in one of the reports. I'm sorry, I don't know the page. So what is a grab sample and where do you do those within the township?
So essentially a grab sample is any sample that's taken outside of what an analyzer would collect. So we have online analyzers for distribution chlorine and all kinds of stuff at the plant. A grab sample is any you grab and literally analyze at that time using one of our handheld devices, for example, or a grab sample could also be a bacteriological sample that we're required to make. So that's kind of the difference between the two. We do distribution sampling throughout the distribution system. We've got a few locations for our BAC-T samples, also for distribution chlorine residuals. And we also do grab samples at the water plant as well to verify that analyzers are reading correctly. Yeah, so that's the difference between those two.
Okay, and I have one more follow-up, if I may, through you, Mayor. The second one, I saw that there was $46,000 for new water meters. So how many did that replace with that amount of money? Do we know?
That was around 420 meters
Okay,
were purchased and replaced. They didn't all get done this year. Some of there's been some carryover into this
but
year.
they were all
then-
purchased.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council on this report? All right. That's what happens when you do it good for us there, Kyle.
Great.
Easier to read now that we're learning more here. So, all right. So the recommendation then, we basically heard it through our water wastewater manager, but I'll just reconfirm that we're receiving this for information and that we acknowledge and accept the Schedule 22 annual summary reports for 2021 as they are. So motion by Deputy Mayor Burt, seconded by Councillor War. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor then, please. All right, thank you very much.
Great afternoon.
Okay, somebody's been waiting patiently for us here. R8 would be Daryl Payne. He's our fire chief, and this report is regarding our proposed firefighter certification regulation.
Thank you, and through you, your mayor. So for the last month, you see that the fire departments across Ontario have been very busy. On February 1st, 441 chiefs were put into collective shock because they're bringing in the proposed firefighter certification to NFPA standards. If you were a fire department that had poor records, that did not take training seriously, that you did not apply for grandfathering in the past, your municipality would be in dire trouble at this time. Because they want all fire departments brought up to standards by 2026 for the firefighting capabilities, and for the 1006 NFPA up there given to 2028. So the burden was placed mostly onto the volunteer fire departments because we only have limited training resources and times through the week. Like Asphodel-Norwood, we train twice a month for training, and the third training is maintenance. I'm happy to say that Asphodel-Norwood is in a good situation here. We're gonna weather this without much damage. But I've said before, if we weren't prepared, it would have been catastrophic. So going through it, you see that we've been very busy. And one thing that happened, it's not on our timelines. On February 19th, I attended another webinar. And this was actually presented by the fire chief, or the fire marshal of Ontario, Mr. Pegg himself, with the Solicitor General of Ontario as his backup. So this is very serious, and it's going through. So he answered a lot of the questions that I outlined in this report. So I'll go over some of the changes. But I'm happy to say that the legacy is going to be applied for everything. And with the training notes and the training we've done in Asphodel-Norwood, I'm quite confident most of the legacy will be applied. So that's going to help out with our potential costs in the future. So let's go through this. First part of it is the regulation itself. We go to the table 1, if you want some clarification on that. Column 1 is the firefighter is the standard. Is what they are. Sorry, column 1 is what they want, and column 2 is a standard, and column 3 is a timeline, and they wanted all these done. So quick overview. All our recruits go to the OETA for training, and it takes up items 1 through to 6. So we spent a lot of money there, but all our recruits have been certified in all those areas already through the department. Our officers are all trained are all NFPA standard for training and for their job themselves as officers. Our fire prevention officer has all the training he needs, so we're okay in that section also. So the only problem we would have would be the legacy for the older fire personnel who did not take classes or took classes before NFPA came in. So what the NFPA or what the fire marshal is going to do next year on January the 1st, all departments in Ontario shall submit their legacy applications, and they'll be considered by the fire marshal, and some will be audited to go through. So we have our work done. We have this prepared by them. I'd like to go over to the explanations on and went over some of this. Okay, part 2. All new recruits go to the training center. They retain NFPA 1001 firefighter 1 and 2, 1072 hazmat, and 1072 hazmat technical. So that part of all of the columns are taken care of. All our officers, now I might be repeating myself. I just want to make sure you guys know that the firefighter we need to have trainers and officer training for our officers, and a fire prevention officer must have this training also. We also have firefighters taking these courses when available for the future. So we're looking for when our fire prevention officer retires, so someone else is ready to take them over. We are already doing that. So in 2015, Asphodel-Norwood went into the grandfathering opportunity, and all of our requests were granted by the fire marshal, so it helped out with all the senior firefighters. So legacy, there was a lot of questions before that, but the fire marshal says that they're opening up to everything. So that's gonna come to our chart in the further on down, and we'll go through that. But that was our biggest question. So it was answered the other day. So the fire marshal in the last 10 years, they've been in a transition themselves. They merged with emergency management. They lost a lot of people, and they were lost for a while, and they didn't. And a lot of the fire chiefs don't have much confidence. So they're turning the page. They're under the gun too with this regulation. Also, they're going to have it done by 2026. Not just the municipalities, the fire marshal, and the fire departments. So come down to it, the Solicitor General saying it's all to do with occupational health and safety. Your municipalities are preparing themselves in case of future litigation for problems. That's the reason they're doing it, having a basic standard across the board. If you think about it, it's a good way to go. They're also saying there's going to be no cost, but there has to be cost. And so books alone. So if we do the fire pump operation course was $1,275. We sent 5 or 6 people to that last year. And it was a 5-day course. So how can a small fire department put 35 guys through on 2 hours or 4 hours a month for training? It's not possible. So thank God for the legacy. And as I said, if we're audited, I'm quite sure that it will be passed by the fire marshal. But I've worked out the chart, the different colors. So the green was the possible legacy. I'm going to have to apply for all the green areas to the fire marshal, and they will make it. They will make the decision either we need to be taking those courses or not. The red part is stuff that Asphodel-Norwood does not need to be certified on. So there's quite a bit of it. So that was the 2006 all the technical rescues. We're at a awareness level. So we do not need to take any courses there. So I'm gonna go down to my conclusions. There's probably a few of them here. The technical briefing that they promised us came out Friday afternoon after the final presentation. So I do have it. I've shared it with the CEO. So it did answer a lot of the questions that I had. There's 441 fire departments that are going to be applying for legacy at the same time. So how can they have that all done in 3 or 4 months, checking the needs for all these departments? So it's going to be a logistical nightmare for the OFM. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can do it or not. The technical rescue we don't need. They keep stating it's not going to cost any more money. It has to. That has to cost us more money. So what it's going to be, I'll know after our legacy it has been assessed by the OFM and they get a decision on it. So I went through most of all this. The interior sill process is going to be one taking the legacy over. The timelines I think are a little too great. Like they gave us 1 month for consultation, and in June of next year it's going to be full, or June of this year it's going to be fully. The regulation is going to be enacted. So there's not much time for all municipalities to get back to the government. almost seems like they're trying to ram it down our throats. But in 2018, the Liberal government did bring this forward and it failed. And this year in 2022, it's a Conservative government's brought it through. So it's across the board. So I'm quite sure it's going to go through this year. There's still a lot of questions. The regulation is not complete, but it's getting there. Hopefully by June, they have it done. The financial obligations, we don't really know yet till our legacy is over with. You might have, if some of our legacy is not given process by the OFM, some of our mature firefighters may quit. They don't want to go back to school for weeks on end. So we might be losing some personnel over that. So I would like to motion by council to have staff to write to OFM asking for money. I'd like to ask for more time, but I don't think that's possible. I think the government's made their mind up. This is going to go through. So as I said before, we're in very good shape because we do have good records. We do have good training. And like I say, it may cost us some money, but I think that we could budget it in the future and get through this. And there will be some hiccups in the future, that's for sure. Thank you. That was a mouthful.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Daryl, for that. Candace, is there anything you'd like to say further to this at all as to when the fire chief is asking for to motion to go to the fire marshals for money? Is there one thing after another? Is there something you'd like to add further to that for us?
Sure, Mayor. I think when we're asking for the province for federal funding, we have to ensure that Asphodel-Norwood needs it. So if another municipality, which I think there's going to be plenty, are going to be submitting letters to the Ontario Fire Marshal's office requesting a funding opportunity to offset the cost of training, then I think it would be prudent for council to receive that piece of correspondence and decide at that time if you're going to receive information or support versus writing our own. When technically, if the legacy provision goes through, there'll be very little cost. So us asking for funding for the other part of this you have to be cognizant of is we're asking for funding for an operational item. It's not capital. Very, very seldom does the provincial and federal governments release grants for operational items. They feel the transfer payment from the province to the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund funds operational items such as this. I think you're going to have the opportunity to speak to it. I think when we receive some correspondence from 100 other municipalities in the province looking for support. So we will support them in their initiative versus us having an ask, because when we ask the province for money, we need to ensure we need it. That would be my only thought to that. Now that position has changed since the fire chief has drafted his report, now that we know where they stand on the legacy provisions that they came out with on the 19th. At the time of drafting this report, when he requested council support, we did not know that. Because if I had known that, we would have removed that section of the report at that time.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. And I think just a comment to the fire chief before I open to council is you said we have to be in compliance by 2026, I believe. So is that the right date, Daryl?
That's right.
Yeah, so that, like we've already done our budget for 2022. So we still have the budget of the year 23, 24, and 25. If we do know going further from your reports, if we did need to budget more money for the fire department, we're able to have a couple years in there in order to help budget for something like that, I would think. Candace, you want to go further on that?
Yes, I agree. And I suspect you'll also have the 2026 budget as well. So I believe you'll have 4 operational budgets to address any training deficits. I think in principle, what the province is trying to achieve makes sense from those of us who are in a role of risk management. Mm-hmm. A unified standard across the board, whether you're a volunteer or a full-time firefighter, needs to remain the same. But the ability for us to achieve it is different. And that's where they're missing the point. Not saying that we all don't need to be trained to ensure from a liability perspective and from a health and safety service to our residents that we're not achieving that. But they need to understand that there is a difference between volunteer fire departments and full-time fire departments, and they're missing the mark. That is very clear on here. You have 1 month to comment, and they weren't forthright with the legacy provision until they got an immense amount of pushback, and they got backed into a corner from my perspective. And then they came out with the legacy to make some of it go away. That said, I do think there's an opportunity for us to even look at our own department, look at our training records. And even if someone has received a legacy provision and then is not technically required from a compliance perspective to receive that training, we need to offer that opportunity to that firefighter, because experience doesn't always account for everything. But we can take more time to do that as we're looking at the department and we're not handcuffed to the 2026 date. So Mayor, those are my thoughts.
Yep.
I have
that's
an-
great. Yep, go
I have
ahead. Don.
another, I just wanted to say that, do we need to train everybody to the same standard? Like if you're not gonna run a pump, does a guy have to take the pump operations course? That's something I might have to ask legal when the final comes through. So I'm not quite sure on that.
No, and I agree, Daryl. I think where we're going to run into it is we have no idea who's going to respond to a
That's
call.
right.
And so if you choose, and these are all hypothetical numbers, these are not actual fact, but say we had 5 firefighters that we train with pump training and they've taken the courses and they're completely certified. We get a call that requires the pumps to be utilized and none of those 5 attend. And then we end up in a legal situation, as you know, when insurance companies are involved, which in 9 times out of 10, every call you attend outside of a medical call, an insurance company is involved. This legislation is opening the door for insurance companies to check into our training records to ensure we are compliant. That's the back door to all of this. So we have to go through our training records with a fine-tooth comb and ensure a law of averages states that when we are responding to a call, that we have the right complement of firefighters, considering we have no control over it because we're not full-time. And that's another part of it that they're missing. But I think it can be managed between now and 2026. We'll be able to take a look at that complement. Now that we're not necessarily under the legacy gun, we'll be able to take a step back and go through all of it and try to ensure that we are covered as much as we can be covered for volunteer service.
Yeah, that's one thing. We just don't want trouble in the township, and we're going to do the best that we can with what we have to work with at this time. So, Councillor War, I seen your hand, please.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor. Yeah, quite a task to get everything done. If there's no funding opportunities for training via the province, would there be any funding opportunities to help with training and costs involved with that through federal or even private ventures that we may be able to look into?
That's something we'd have to check out.
Yeah, federal government doesn't touch fire department and emergency services. It is a provincial mandate. So I haven't seen any federal funds that speak to those types of services. That said, a private funding stream, I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to just keep our eyes and ears open to see if anything opens. I'm unaware of anything sitting here today.
Deputy Mayor Burt, please.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks for the report, Daryl. Yeah, when I first saw that about the legacy, that was a little bit frightening. So I'm really glad to hear that as of after the writing of the report, there was a more positive look at that. Yeah, and I did make a note in my notes to, we need to be proactive and write a letter. But now that legacy situation is somewhat resolved, I think we're in a much better situation. And it sounds like with all the ongoing training, and we've had many new recruits come on board just in this term of council. And so we're likely in a much better situation. I would assume there's a number of small fire departments. This is going to cripple them in a lot of ways. And it's frightening. There may be some communities that result in having no fire service or very diminished fire service. So I think it's, having certifications the same right across the board, it's a good thing. But there's so many questions, and hopefully between now and 2026, a lot of this gets resolved. So I don't really have any questions, but thank you for looking into this, and thank goodness the legacy portion of that you've had some answers on that. And yeah, that's just my comment.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time have any comments or concerns? Councillor Walsh, please.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. And it's really just to piggyback on what my two fellow councillors have said beforehand. The legacy piece is great. I still think there's some value in every fire person having some current training, because things are continually changing, and I think we would be amiss to just count on experience as the only factor for every fireman or fire person to know what needs to be done. So we certainly don't want to lose experienced firemen that don't want to go to class every week, but I still think there's an opportunity that everyone, we all do it. I do it with work every year. We're always learning new things. So there's always new things to be learned. I think the big point that I just took from Candace's thought was, love the idea of all the training. I just think they forgot that volunteer versus a full-time fire force takes longer. If we have to 2026, I think it gives us, we've got 4 budget years to make this happen. We got the legacy piece and understand how much training that group may need. So I think we've been able to buy some time, and I think we've got a smart group, Daryl, with your team and our township team, to figure out what's the best thing we need to do year over year to make sure that we're in good shape by 2026.
Okay, thank you.
And the municipality will be there by 2026. That's guaranteed.
Yeah.
We shall make it.
Awesome.
Councillor Ward, please.
Yes, thank you. Just a follow up through you, Mayor. Do you think that there's any concern or chatter that this might be an attempt to have municipalities pool their resources to do like bigger volunteer fire departments? I don't know if that's a good question or if that's antagonistic, or I just thought I would throw it out there, like where the province is going with this and for what purpose, because our purpose for this resident. So
I can answer that. You said the A word, which is amalgamation. Yes, I personally, there has been conversations that I have been a part of in regards to not municipal amalgamations, but fire department service amalgamations. There's a lot of municipalities that struggle with recruitment before this regulation was even in place, as far as being able to retain. And obviously that issue was magnified with COVID. And so what has happened then is municipalities that struggled with recruitment prior to COVID and now with this regulation are likely going to continue to struggle even worse. So those municipalities are reaching out to their neighbors saying, is there an opportunity to have cross-border fire services, and what does that look like? So I do think, yes, you're going to see it. Do I think you'll necessarily see it in our direct area? I wouldn't count it out, but you're definitely going to see it in the north. But then geography comes into play, where they're large geographical areas. So they already have huge agreements in place where they're able to provide services to each other. So yes, I think you've tipped onto something there. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but cross-border fire services is already a conversation. And this regulation is just going to bring that to the forefront for those municipalities that struggle.
All right, good discussion. The only thing I was thinking of was that I can see down the road that not too far future is like what our CAO suggested, is that other townships will probably write a letter and basically we'll all take recommendation from that letter and possibly send it on to AMO, I guess, to look after and come back to the province saying like municipalities just can't handle that for most cases. But I think we have a few years out that we're going to be in good shape anyways for ourselves. So any other comments or concerns or questions on this R8 with the fire chief? All right, seeing no hands then. So I may be wrong on this, but I'm just going to do the recommendation that's in front of me as a motion that we receive this as information and then direct staff to provide feedback to the Office of the Fire Marshal and the Government of Ontario on the proposed firefighter certification regulation. I believe that would be the motion. Yep, motion by Councillor War, seconded by Councillor Walsh. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. All right, thank you very much, Daryl. Keep up the good work, sir.
Yeah.
All right, R9, then Candace White, our CAO Clerk Treasurer. And this report, Candace, is regarding the adoption of the 2022 to 2024 strategic plan. Please.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, Council, as you're aware, at our last meeting, you were presented with the draft strategic plan. It did go out for public comment. We did receive comment that is included in the staff report in regards to the potential of additional dressing rooms at the community center. It is a recommendation of staff that is a great comment, and it's definitely wonderful feedback that we'll take into consideration, but could be addressed in a capital budget scenario versus maybe amending one of our strategic plan items, but I'll leave it to council for direction. That's just staff recommendation. Outside of that, there has been no changes to the plan itself, outside of the few little tweaks that we made after the draft was presented at our last meeting. So they have been made, and the document is in front of council to govern us out until 2024. I'll leave it to you for any additional questions. I think I've pretty much said all there is to say on this one.
Yeah, we've been living and breathing this for a while now. So Councillor War, you had your hand up.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I think the document looks really great. I just wanted to ask, is this primarily a digital document? Like, and will there be printed versions as well? And just wondering how that would work.
Thank you, Councillor War. It is primarily digital, but we do traditionally print a couple dozen copies. So I think we printed 25 copies of our previous one to have in hand. Sometimes staff go to meetings. Sometimes we have to present a resident with one if they come to the counter. There's other different opportunities that we need to actually have a printed form, but primarily it lives digitally.
All right, any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Walsh, please.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. And I just think I echo our CEO's comment that the comment regarding dressing rooms at the arena, very valid. Certainly COVID has probably made that even a little more heightened, that we've been able to have more rooms to spread our user groups out. However, I really don't think it'll impact our strategic plan going forward. It's obviously something that we can document as a need, something over with the community center that we can potentially budget for down the road, but I really don't think it will impact the ability for us to approve our strategic plan as it's already been presented to the community.
It almost sounded like a motion.
I will gladly make that a motion.
All right. Any other questions or comments before we ask for a motion then? Nothing? No hands? All right. If Councillor Walsh, you want to make a motion? That's great.
Yeah, I will gladly make the motion that the Council of the Township of Asphodel accepts this report regards the adoption of the 2022-2024 strategic plan, and further that the Council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood adopts the 2022 strategic plan as presented today.
Perfect. Thank you. Seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Burt. Is there any other discussion on that motion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. All right, then we're on to R10 then, would be Candace White again. This is regarding our RFP results for the design build of the Community Center Fitness Club expansion. Exciting news. Thank you. Candace, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So the request for proposal results have come in as council is where we're very happy to receive 2 proposals, as the first round of procurement resulted in no proposals being received. When we reached out to the community that provide the design build services, a couple of things were coming into play. One, time of year played into receiving no bids the first round, and then the deficient budget. And they were all saying we needed a bit more. COVID has definitely played a factor. We're going to see it, unfortunately, on every project that we have. That said, we did receive 2 bids, one from Task Force Engineering, Inc., who is the company who built the community center originally and our public works building, as well as ARIA General Contracting and Construction Management. Colliers and Associates, the consultant on the project, as well as myself, reviewed thoroughly both proposals, scored them using a predetermined scoring matrix that was spelled out in the RFP document that all proponents received, and we scored them with Task Force Engineering being the successful proponent. The financial costing traditionally tells the story, but in this case, it did not tell the full story, as they were less than 1% apart. They basically received the exact same score. I don't think I've ever seen 2 proposals come in almost identical for this amount of money. It's closer than some of the $100,000 pieces of equipment that we tender, or you even seen the RFP for the landfill monitoring. It was a way bigger range, and it was not much differential at all, which tells me that's good value for money. The bids are good, that there's those 2 companies are in alignment. So that said, the cost of Task Force Engineering to conduct the design build of the fitness center expansion to the community center is $1,252,200, excluding HST. That doesn't include everything that the project requires, as it does not include the fitness equipment, the consultant to assist with contract management, as there's no one on staff that has built a fitness center before. So we do require some assistance throughout the construction process. We have to do some compaction testing, which is pretty minimal. The accessories for the washrooms weren't included. So, the hand dryers, soap dispensers, toilet paper dispensers, and then the blinds were not included. Those items were left out of the bids by both proponents. We are thinking it's because it's a supply issue. So they don't want to be held up with being able to satisfy the provisions of a contract for supply where the township staff can source those on our own. So that said, an approximate budget for the expansion is $1,440,000. Of that, as Township Council is aware, we have received ICIP, Community Culture Recreation, CCR funding from the provincial and federal governments in the amount of $853,000. That leaves a total of $587,000 approximately that becomes the township portion to fund. It is township staff's recommendation that the working funds reserve funds that portion, which currently sits at $1.2 million. That does not include any potential surplus from the 2021 budget that would be allocated to this reserve. As council knows, and as we have heard from the last few auditing and financial statement presentations, the reserve balances for the township are healthy, and it's time to put some of these funds back into the community. The community has asked for the fitness center. We have went out for surveys. We know what they want. We know they want it there. Ideally, we would have seen it come in a couple $100,000 less, but unfortunately, due to supply, demand, the pandemic, it is what it is. If council does not approve, we will be in contravention of the transfer payment agreement. Therefore, we would lose the $853,000. That is the consequence of today's decision. So it is a double-edged sword. It's great. We got $850,000. It's great that we're able to provide a service and a facility that the community is telling us that they want. The flip side is the pandemic has impacted everything, and it's impacting the price of having this facility built. Delaying it to try to get out of COVID to see if we can get out of it is not, and applying for extensions to the provincial and federal governments is a possibility, but you're rolling the dice. I don't think it's going to get cheaper, and I don't know how quickly we would hear back from the government as far as receiving extensions. It would not be my recommendation to go down that road. Again, I'll leave it with council with any questions.
Thank you, Candace. All right, council, open for discussion, comments. Any questions? All right, Deputy Mayor Burt, please.
Not really any questions. I do agree with our CAO. We have done extensive, going out to the public and seeing what they want. We are receiving $853,000. That's hard to hand back, and that's going to be extremely hard to get back if we turn this down. It's a, 587,000 is a great deal of money, but I, for one, feel confident going into this. Our community is growing. Not only does this service our community, it services surrounding communities as well. And I do think it's a great addition to our township. We're not struggling with reserves right now, and we need to maintain that balance of a balance of reserves where we can obtain funding dollars going forward. So we don't want too much in there, and we don't want to deplete them too much. And I think we've got a balance here. I'm interested to see what the rest of the council members are thinking, but that's where I'm sitting right now. And it's a big build. Glad to see task force was in there. They're familiar with our township. I think that's a huge bonus as well. So those are my comments, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the rest of council have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Ward, please.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, good comments from Deputy Mayor Burt. I just wanted to ask one question. I think it's going to be a wonderful asset with our staff looking after the fitness equipment and things like that. Would there perhaps be an opportunity to phase in the fitness equipment if there, there was an overage that, almost like the playground equipment where we buy one, a slide and a swing set and then add something the next year, that we might be able to do that and budget over a couple of years to bring in more fitness equipment?
That's a fair question. There will be a certain expectation to have certain pieces. I do think that there is an opportunity that maybe we could add to it, but I think ultimately value for money, the more pieces of equipment we buy at once, based on our early discussions with commercial fitness equipment providers, there's value in the quantity of the pieces you're purchasing. So if we went out and bought 10, 10, and 10, we're going to pay more for those 30 than if we went out and bought 30 at once.
Right. Okay.
So the overall that you have spread it out between maybe 2 budget years, but essentially it may end up being that anyway. They're saying final construction is November. I don't know about anybody here, but I haven't seen a single construction project yet that has come in on the exact date they said. Mm-hmm. So we may not be actually putting fitness equipment into that room until December. We adopt our 2023 budget in December. It's a January invoice. We bump it to the next budget year. So the opportunity to have it spread is already there, but I think we need to capitalize on buying power if at all possible.
Yeah, thank you for that answer.
You're welcome.
Good question. All right, Councillor Walsh, please.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. And yeah, as I said and read the report over the weekend, I jotted down 3 things which kind of reinforce what our deputy mayor said. If we don't proceed, we run a significant risk of losing this ISIP funding that we probably would not get back again. So it's potentially the loss of $853,000 that we probably wouldn't get again. Secondly, do we need it? Everything we've heard from our community tells us through surveys and feedback is this is one thing that they really, really want. So I think that weighs into my decision. And thirdly, yes, it's 46% of our working reserve. That is a lot, or may seem like a lot, I guess is my better way of putting that. However, as we've reviewed financial statements over the my last couple of years here, we are in a very positive position from a reserve standpoint. And there is that delicate balance, as our deputy mayor Burt said, is you can get it to the point that it's too high. We do need to start spending some, but I sit here and go, this is something that the community is telling us that they want. We've got a significant amount of provincial and federal money that's come in to help build this. If we delay, it's not going to go down in price. I think I'm in favor of let's move forward with this project now.
All right, thank you for your comments. My only comment is, and you've said it already, the funding from the federal government and the provincial government. If our staff didn't already have their homework done and the polls went out and the people responded one thing after another, if we didn't have this project ready to go and had all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, we wouldn't have got the funding to begin with. So hats off to staff for making this happen for us. Appreciate all their hard work behind the scenes, getting the RFP out too. That's awesome. So, I mean, and having us have a good discussion on this. Yeah, it is expensive, but it's just going to add to the community center. I know I'm looking forward to using it later on, I hope anyways. And let's just hope for the best. So I'm looking for a motion then, I guess at this time. Would somebody like to critique a motion first, or do you want me to read what's recommended on my paper here? What do you want to say here, Council? Who'd like to make a motion? Councillor Walsh this time.
Yeah, basically follow the recommendation that's in at the very beginning of the R10 report, Mayor, if we can.
Okay, so that is that the community center, we received that for information, and further that the council of the township of Asphodel-Norwood award the RFP 2022-01 for the design build of the community center fitness club to Task Force Engineering in the amount of $1,252,052. I can't even say it. The number's so big. So, excluding HST. Help me out, CAO. Say that number for me, please.
$1,252,200.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. Thank you very much.
You're
All right.
welcome.
So, Councillor Walsh, you made that motion. I'll have a seconder, please. Councillor Archer, thank you. Any other comments or questions or concerns on the motion? Deputy Mayor Burt, please.
Do we have a start date?
The design is going to start in March.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or concerns on the motion? All right. Seeing no hands, all in favor. And then that's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you to staff that were all involved on that. Thank you. R11 then, Candace, again, our CAO clerk treasurer. This is R11, and this is regarding our management action list.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So you see in front of you today all of the staff reports that were addressed on February 22nd. And then we're moving on to March 8th. You see some potential preliminary development agreements, fourth quarter variance, and annual development charge report. So those are all housekeeping. You're not going to see the tender results for the LED lighting for the Public Works building because our manager of Public Works hasn't got out of a snowplow truck long enough to release it. You see a report on Truth and Reconciliation Day. Skateboard expansion will probably be the next meeting, and Gallagher's coming to do the council remuneration study results. So definitely the first meeting in March is going to be much lighter than the last two meetings that we've had, that's for sure. There will also be a discussion about in-person council meetings on March 8th, and it'll be up to council at that meeting to make the decision as to whether you want to go in person on March 22nd. And I will leave it with council for any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns, council, at this time on the management action list? No. All right, seeing no hands then, the recommendations that we accept this report with any suggestions that the CAO or the members of councils have made, and we receive it then, please. Deputy Mayor Burt, seconded by Councillor War. Any comments, concerns, questions on the motion? Seeing no hands, all in favor. That's carried. Thank you. Okay, next is correspondence for action. C9, Township of Selwyn, the notice of motion on gypsy moths. Is there anyone that has anything that they'd like to bring forward on that before we make a motion? I have some information that I'm aware of. All right, seeing no hands. I did receive, and I tried to find it, and I apologize to council, but something come across through my emails, through my township phone, and I read it. And it had to do with the government saying that the amount of spray that was used from contractors and one thing after another, and I don't know how it came about, but a lot of this spray was probably overused. And they said they had to regulate it somehow to be a little better because there's only a certain amount that should be sprayed. And the recommendation coming forward was that anyone that wanted to be sprayed should register sooner than later with whoever they had done as a private individual that does that, because they're probably going to have a bit more regulation on how much they're allowed to spray. And that's all I received. I wish I could have found it. So Deputy Mayor Burt, please.
I just wanted to touch base. I think it's good to go through the ministry. They can do the assessments, and there could be more options available versus spraying. So I do think that it's there are other mitigation measures. So I do think it's good to have that input from the ministry. As you know, Mayor, we did have it come to county council where there were some individual residents more to the north on the lakes, and they wanted the county to pay for the spraying on their private properties. And it was rather controversial to say the least, and it was turned down. But I think this notice of motion makes sense to look at it that way. And then it kind of gives us a better picture. I don't have the answers. Certainly southern townships in the county were far less impacted than those to the north, and anybody that had a cottage to the north could certainly attest to that. But I think going this route and having a ministry assessment complete with options is a smart way to go.
So that sounds like a motion of support.
Yes, I will make a motion of support.
All right, is there a seconder? And we can carry on after. Councillor Ward. Okay, anyone want to speak to the motion then? Councillor Ward?
I just wanted to say that through you, Mayor, that the gypsy moths do destroy so much of the habitat. I know that they do, it's a 3-year cycle. And I did read that the southern portion of Ontario is going to be hit quite significantly this year. So I think that to support this is a good thing. I looked at the third paragraph where it says Honorable Greg Rickford, the Ontario Minister of Northern Development, made a commitment at the Roma 2022 conference in the forum to mitigate some of these measures. So I think it's good to support this.
Okay, anyone else want to speak to the motion? Good. All right, seeing no hands, then I'll ask all in favor. And that's carried. Thank you very much. Councillor liaison reports. Does anybody want to say anything verbal today? And if it's quite involved, then of course we'll have it written out from Melanie later. Deputy Mayor Burt, please.
And Melanie, I apologize. I didn't get it sent in to you, but I'll make it short and sweet. County budget was passed. Many of you probably saw that in paper or social media. 2.6% increase comes to $9.11 per 100,000 of residential assessment. That is not real estate market assessment, just so you know. So that's what that comes out to. February 14th, we had a library board meeting, and we didn't have a meeting in January, so the election of officers was held at our February meeting, and we have a new chair who is Krista Rutherford. Vice is Maggie Brickle, which was the same as last year. Secretary is Marg Dawson, same as last year, and Candace White is the treasurer of the library board. And there are some increased hours at Norwood branch, which started in February. And I believe council gets the newsletters and that sort of thing, so you do know up to date what's going on as well as far as programming. And I'll just touch base on this, but Councillor Walsh may want to expand a bit. EdBack has now a new terms of reference, and it's called a Special Projects Committee. And we've had a couple meetings basically looking at various projects that we want to look at throughout the township. They may or may not include some increased tree planting, some work at the Four Corners, the Foodland corner there, perhaps some murals, and certainly showcase Asphodel-Norwood as well. And perhaps some partnerships with other committees or groups in the township. One thing I wanted to ask here, and maybe it's best to ask at the committee, so this is a question for Candace. We have lost 3 key members who have moved on from our committee. Is it the committee that, if they wish to have more members, that ask council, or is it the prerogative of council to say, hey, we've lost 3 members on this committee, should we open it up? That being said, there'll be a whole process come November. So just a question for you.
So the only thing that triggers it from the committee standpoint is missed meetings as per the terms of reference. So if I think it's over 3 consecutive missed meetings without explanation, the committee is to notify council of this, and then council is to remove that person off of the bylaw. And then the second part of that conversation is, it isn't an automatic replacement, it's will they be replaced? So yes, due to the pandemic and changing in people's circumstance, 3 people have resigned from the committee. I'm of the personal belief, based on the work plan that was discussed, I believe that we would be fine for the 2022 year to go out and recruit and go through all of that for 5 months, and then they are able to take part of that, and then they have to go through the whole process again, either from a volunteer perspective or a staff perspective. I think that may be a bit onerous. The other thing is, I will send out the exit interview to those 3 members. There is an exit interview for volunteers, so that information comes back to me just to help with volunteer committees moving forward.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just a question to Candace about that. So when does council actually run into the lame duck period? Considering if we had to go back out to get volunteers to come into a committee, is it like June or July, something like that, we'd run into lame duck? Sorry to throw you there, but.
August 19th. Through to November 14th.
Okay.
And it isn't an automatic. It all depends on whether we have 2/3 of council with the potential of turning over. So we have to hit that ratio, that threshold, depending on what the nominations are. So it's August 19th at 2 p.m., which is nomination day. That's nomination day in time. So nomination period is May 2nd to August 18th, with nomination day being August 19th at 2 p.m.
All right, thank you.
All of that election stuff, we won't get into it today, but all of that stuff is being worked on with staff, and we'll be updating the website with all that information for council to take a look at.
Yeah, I only brought that up because of trying to recruit new people to come into a committee, and one thing after another, when council's on their last days kind of thing, heading out the door to the new re-election. That's all I was getting at through the comment there. All right, so anyone else have any thing on the liaison reports to bring forward? Councillor Ward, please.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to give an update on ORCA, the Otonabee Regional Conservation Authority. I did attend a meeting last Thursday, which I will send them minutes to the next meeting. But I did want to say that they've issued another flood watch update. And one thing that may be of interest to both the councillors and to anybody that might be watching is that you can monitor online the water levels, because there's hydrometric meters. I think one's below Norwood and then one's below Westwood. And so you can actually see the flow rates. And so the Otonabee Regional Conservation Authority, on their website, you can view those online, as well as the Water Survey of Canada real-time hydrometric data. I just thought that's sometimes interesting to see how fast those levels are flowing. And you can see that even in the past few days, how much the ice has opened up. So I just wanted to throw that out there from ORCA, from the flood data, and I'll pass that on, message on to Melanie, so she might be able to put it up on the website for the warning, the flood warning. I have one more thing, but it'll be under general business.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything under the liaison reports then? All right, thank you. Now we're on the agenda, CAO clerk treasurer's list, please.
I have nothing to report to council today.
All right. Thank
Between
you.
Thursday's agenda and today's agenda, I really have nothing else to say. I think.
No problem. That's great. So no, nothing
Well,
required.
I always have something to say, but I just don't think that there's anything that I need to bring council's attention to at this time, other than maybe thank you for your ongoing support in the winter. Obviously, we had to declare a significant weather event due to ensuring that we are compliant. And in case council's wondering, no, we did not do it just because the city of Peterborough did. In case anybody's wondering, it was dictated when your staff hit the hours, they hit the hours. So it's an operational item. So we'll have to, I suspect it'll be in as we're in a weather event right now, from what I hear out my window.
Yep.
So thank you for all the support, and we do prioritize when we can get out to properties. And it's important for our residents to remember that the traveling portion of the road has to be our number one and main priority. And we've received multiple emails, text messages, phone calls, voicemails over the course of the last week. And our heart goes out to everyone. We wish we could be everywhere every time they need us. But sometimes what happens on private property has to be dealt with on private property. So we're getting there. We hear you, and everything is logged, and we will be out to address everything if we can. If not, Mother Nature's going to take care of the snow anyway. So by the looks of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that, because that's exactly where we were at this week for sure. And our hearts goes out to the Public Works Department for the amount of hours they've had to put in, and the thawing that we've had with the culverts that were froze and one thing after another. So they've done well for what we've had to work with. Mother Nature doesn't seem to want to stop right now, and
No.
we'll see where it goes from here. So all the best. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda then is general business. I know Councillor Ward, you had something under general business, please.
Yes, thank you, through you, and hopefully this will be the last time I speak today. So I just wanted to say that we are celebrating International Women's Day once again on Tuesday, March 8th, 2022. And there's going to be a virtual event that's taking place in the township. And the theme is just for the health of it. And everyone's welcome, men and women, everyone is welcome. And we have three great presenters. We have Trish Reed, Carolyn Owen, and Julie Brown. And more details can be found on Facebook. And I will for sure send a link to Melanie and staff to try to get that out. But it's a free event, and we hope that people will come and celebrate International Women's Day through AN Township. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Deputy Mayor Burt, please.
And just to go a little bit further, the event will be recorded because it is a Tuesday and it's a Tuesday morning. It will be recorded, and the link will be up after that as well. And then I just have one more thing. Today is Canadian Ag Day, so it's a great day to thank a farmer, support Canadian agriculture and Canadian food, as well as local food. So I just wanted to put that out there today.
You grow it, I'll eat it, basically.
Yeah.
Right? And don't forget to shop local. Oh, anyone else have anything under general business? All right, I just had one thing about the County Recognition Awards are on again this year. And they're going to be held May 27th at Tavern Monaghan between 6 and 10 p.m. Anyone that has anything out there that they want to help recognize a citizen in our township, they'd have to submit it through into the county, obviously. If they need help with that, then they can send their information on to the township, and we can send it on through too. So it's important. I know we're a small community, close-knit community, and it's tough to find a recognition sometimes every year, but COVID has put a stall on us for the last couple of years, so there should be lots. But I do believe through Deputy Mayor Burt, I believe county is going to fall back on some of the names that were there previous in the last year and going forward with that, but they said they would take more in a heartbeat, apparently. Yeah, no, she's agreeing, so. I'm not
Yes,
out of
that's
line.
correct.
Thank you. One other thing under general business for myself, I just wondered as a question, and I like to put you on the spot, Candace, sometimes, I guess. Development charges from the school boards. Have we heard anything about that yet? No.
No, I don't have an update for council. No, sorry. I haven't received any further correspondence.
Okay.
I can look into it though. I'll look into the status.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, but we are going to be talking development charges in the county coming forward in the next month, I believe, Deputy Mayor Bird, if I'm not mistaken, but it's coming up soon where they're going to want to revisit that again. So, and they're not cheap now. So, okay. So if no one else has anything else under general business, then I'm going to ask council then for a motion to suspend council so that we may go into a closed